Recent discoveries in the Amazon rainforest have revealed complex geometric patterns visible only from above. These precisely aligned structures dating back over 2,000 years suggest ancient civilizations possessed sophisticated engineering knowledge that challenges our understanding of pre-Columbian societies. How did they achieve such precision? Paisley Caves. If you ever find yourself deep in the high desert of southern Oregon, way past the last gas station, beyond the quiet hills, and open stretches of sagebrush and sun-baked dust, you might stumble on something that doesn't look like much. Just a few shallow caves carved into the side of a cliff. No signs, no fences, easy to overlook. But those small caves, known as the Paisley Caves, are one of the most important and mysterious archaeological sites in North America. Not because of what's sitting there now, but because of what was buried underneath, hidden for thousands of years. Back in the 1930s, an amateur archaeologist wandered out here. Curious, he poked around, hoping to find signs that ancient people might have taken shelter in the caves. He found some old bones and charcoal, but nothing groundbreaking. The real discovery didn't come until the early 2000s, when a full-scale excavation kicked off under Dr. Dennis Jenkins from the University of Oregon. What they uncovered didn't just change the story of the Paisley Caves. It challenged everything we thought we knew about the first people in America. The team wasn't looking to stir up controversy. They were doing the usual slow and steady work, digging layer by layer, logging artifacts, collecting soil samples. But then they found something strange, something unpleasant, at least at first glance. Fossilized human feces. Copper lights, to use the scientific word. Yeah, not exactly the kind of find that makes headlines, but it should have, because what was inside those ancient remains told a story no one expected. When researchers tested the DNA, it came back human and the age over 14,000 years old. That's more than 1,000 years older than what used to be the widely accepted beginning of human life in the Americas, the Clovis culture. For decades, most archaeologists believed that the Clovis people, named after the distinctive stone spear points first found in New Mexico, were the first true Americans. They supposedly crossed from Siberia into Alaska around 13,000 years ago and spread southward through an ice-free corridor. But the evidence from Paisley flipped that script. Here were humans in Oregon, far south of the ice sheets, living their lives before the Clovis people even appeared. Not just passing through, either. These early residents were hunting, cooking, making tools. There were stone blades, animal bones, fire pits, even ancient fiber sandals. It wasn't just a fluke, it was a window into a long-lost world. Of course, not everyone accepted it at first. Some critics thought the DNA must have been contaminated. Others argued the remains could have shifted downward through the soil layers, making them appear older than they really were. But Jenkins and his team didn't back down. They pointed to the volcanic ash and tightly packed layers of sediment that sealed the copper lights in place. They brought in new protocols to prevent contamination. Independent labs confirmed the findings. Eventually, the resistance started to crack. More scientists looked at the data and admitted something important had been found here, and that's where the bigger mystery begins. Who were these people? They didn't leave behind written records, no cave paintings, no grand monuments or burials, just fragments of life, stone tools, ash, bits of food, and the oldest known human DNA on the continent. What's fascinating is that their tools don't resemble the high-tech spear points of the Clovis people. They're simpler, more local in design. Some researchers think these early Oregonians didn't come through an inland ice corridor at all. Instead, they may have paddled down the Pacific coastline in small boats, hugging the foggy shorelines, living off shellfish and kelp forests. That theory is gaining ground now that the first Americans were seafarers, not treers. Maybe these people stopped at Paisley for a night, or maybe they stayed settled in the caves for a season, maybe longer. The caves themselves aren't very deep. They're more like overhangs about 30 ft high, looking out across what used to be a lake. Recent discoveries in the Amazon rainforest have revealed complex geometric patterns visible only from above. These precisely aligned structures dating back over 2,000 years suggest ancient civilizations possessed sophisticated engineering knowledge that challenges our understanding of pre-Columbian societies. How did they achieve such precision? There's no visitor center, no big signs explaining what happened here, just a dirt road that eventually ends in a metal gate. The caves are open to the public, but not easy to reach. If you go, it's likely you'll be alone. And that makes it easier to imagine what it was like back then. A small group of people gathered around a fire 14,000 years ago, sharing food and stories in a language we'll never hear. To the indigenous tribes in this region, none of this is surprising. Many of their oral traditions already spoke of ancestors living in these lands, long before archaeologists were willing to consider it. So, in a way, science is just catching up to what native communities have been saying all along. Other ancient sites have come to light in recent decades. Meteorite rock shelter in Pennsylvania, Monteverde in Chile, the G site in Texas, but Paisley Caves stands out because of that rare human DNA locked in the earth for thousands of years. It's not just tools or bones, it's personal, it's someone's life frozen in time. And yet, for all we've learned, the caves still leave us with more questions. Where did these people go? Did they merge with later cultures or vanish without a trace? Why haven't we found more sites like this? And how is it in a country so full of research and technology that we're still in the dark about something as basic as when humans first arrived? That's what makes Paisley Caves so powerful. It's not just a dig site, it's a challenge. A reminder that history isn't locked in textbooks. It's still being uncovered, sometimes in the least likely places, sometimes in something as humble and weird as ancient poop. If you ever make it out near the little town of Paisley, Oregon, take the detour, drive the bumpy road, bring some water, wear good shoes, and give yourself a little time. When you step inside one of those caves, you'll be standing in the middle of a mystery that's still unfolding. And if you pause long enough, maybe you'll feel it too. That quiet presence of the past, gently nudging us to keep asking, keep digging, and keep listening. Because some stories haven't been lost, they've just been waiting. Fort Rock Cave. Out in the middle of Oregon's high desert, where the land stretches flat and dry under a wide sky, you'll see something unexpected. Rising out of the sagebrush like some ancient ruin is a massive ring of jagged rock. At first glance, it almost looks man-made, like the crumbling wall of an old fortress. That's Fort Rock. And just a short distance west, tucked into a small limestone outcrop, there's a quiet little cave that, without much fanfare, helped rewrite what we thought we knew about the earliest people to live in North America. The cave doesn't look like much from the outside. No towering entrance, no carvings, just a dusty hollow in a desert cliff. But step inside or even just stand at the mouth of it, and you're standing at the edge of a story that reaches back 10,000 years. It's called Fort Rock Cave. And what was found here changed everything. Back in 1938, a young archaeologist named Luther Kresman, working out of the University of Oregon, came to explore this cave. He wasn't randomly digging. Local stories hinted that the area might have been used by ancient people, maybe as shelter or a seasonal camp. So Kresman and his team started excavating carefully, peeling back layers of dust and ash. What they uncovered wasn't treasure or weapons or bones. It was sandals, dozens of them. Not rough scraps of plant material either. These were beautifully made sandals woven from sagebrush bark. Some were flat, others had toe straps, but all of them showed skill, real craftsmanship. These weren't just thrown together in a hurry. Someone took the time to make them right. And when Kresman had the sandals tested for age, the results stunned everyone. At least 9,000 years old. Later testing pushed that number closer to 10,000. Think about that. These sandals were made around 8,000 BCE. That's before the Great Pyramids, before Stonehenge, before agriculture had even really taken root across most of the world. These are some of the oldest known shoes on Earth, and they weren't buried in some perfect display. They were found beneath layers of volcanic ash, likely from the eruption of Mount Mazama, the same eruption that eventually formed Crater Lake. That ash helped seal the cave and preserve the contents like a prehistoric time capsule. The discovery of those sandals changed everything archaeologists thought they knew about early life in this part of the continent. Before then, most experts believed people had only arrived in the Oregon region a few thousand years ago. Maybe they were nomads passing through. But the sandals, so well made, so clearly designed for walking long distances across dry terrain, told a different story. Whoever made them wasn't just surviving, they were living. They had technique, patience, a deep understanding of their environment, and the care put into those sandals suggests something more than necessity. It points to culture. Alongside the sandals, archaeologists also found stone tools, animal bones and fire remains, all signs of a people who weren't just wandering, but settling in, at least seasonally. These weren't random stops on a migration route. This was home or something like it. The cave itself is small, about 50 ft deep and 40 ft wide, with a low ceiling that forces you to stoop a little. The floor is soft and dusty, and once you step inside, the desert heat fades and everything gets quiet. You can almost hear the past in there. It's easy to imagine a scene. A family gathered near the entrance, working sagebrush bark into long strands, twisting them into cords, someone preparing food, someone tending a fire, kids playing in the dust, and somewhere in the back, those sandals are set aside to dry, ready for the next journey. Over the years, Fort Rock Cave has become something of a pilgrimage spot for those who love archaeology. But it's not the kind of place you'll stumble across by accident. The cave sits on protected land and is only accessible through guided tours arranged by Oregon State Parks. That's for good reason. Many of the original artifacts, including the sandals, are now stored at the University of Oregon Museum of Natural and Cultural History, where they're preserved and studied. Still, even standing outside the cave has weight. The surrounding desert is wide and silent. Fort Rock looms in the distance, looking like it could collapse or lift off at any moment. In reality, it's the ancient shoreline of a massive Ice Age lake. Thousands of years ago, this whole region was underwater. What's now sagebrush and dust used to be home to birds, reeds, fish, and freshwater. The people who lived here would have seen a very different landscape, but their story isn't completely lost. It's just quiet, hidden in the details, in sandals that lasted 10 millennia, in fire rings buried under ash, in simple tools left behind, never meant to be found. And there's something else worth saying here. The Klamath and Northern Pute peoples, indigenous communities who have lived in this region for generations, have long told stories of ancestors in these lands since time immemorial. These discoveries don't contradict that. If anything, they validate it. Archaeology is finally beginning to catch up to the stories these communities have carried all along. So why isn't Fort Rock Cave more famous? Part of it is its location. The nearest town, Silver Lake, is tiny. There's no highway sign pointing the way. You have to really want to find it. And when you do, it's not flashy. There's no grand visitor center, no interactive museum, just a dusty trail and a locked gate that opens only on scheduled tours. And yet, what was found here is more than just an artifact. It's a message. These sandals weren't built to last forever. They were made for walking, for crossing rough desert trails, for daily life. And yet somehow they outlived everything. The climate, the culture, the language of the people who made them. They survived not because they were meant to, but because time is strange that way. Sometimes the quietest objects speak the loudest. So, who were these people? We still don't know. Were they part of a larger culture that's vanished? Were they isolated groups living off the land, adapting to the harsh desert? Were they connected to others who moved across the West during the same era? The answers are still buried. Maybe in other caves, other ash layers, or maybe they're lost to time completely. But Fort Rock Cave gave us something rare, not just proof that people were here, but a glimpse into how they lived, how they adapted, how they created. It's not a grand monument. It's not carved in stone. It's a pair of woven sandals, fragile, practical, beautiful in their own quiet way. And maybe that's what makes it all the more powerful. This wasn't history written to impress. It was history lived day by day, step by step. So if you ever find yourself in Oregon's high desert standing at the edge of that strange rock ring, take a moment, look past the dust, past the silence. Imagine the lake that used to shimmer in the sun, the voices that once filled the cave, the hands that twisted bark into something useful. And remember, sometimes the oldest stories aren't in books or stone. Sometimes they're told by what was left behind. Crater Lake legends. The first time you see Crater Lake, it doesn't feel quite real. The color alone makes you pause. It's this deep, unreal blue that looks like it's been dialed up by someone playing with saturation. The water is still glassy, cold, and it just sits there, quiet and contained inside the jagged rim of a long, dead volcano. No rivers run in, none run out. It's just there, like a secret the earth forgot to hide. But long before the roads, the tour buses, or the smartphone photos from the rim, this place held a very different meaning. For the Klamath people, Crater Lake wasn't just a natural wonder. It was sacred, dangerous, alive. It had a story, a violent one. And even now, standing on the edge, that old energy is hard to ignore. The Klamath Nation has lived in this part of Oregon for thousands of years, long before any written history. Their stories go back further than we can truly measure. And in those stories, Crater Lake wasn't always a lake. Once it was a towering mountain, Mount Mazama, rising high above the landscape, proud and powerful. But Mazama wasn't just a mountain. According to Klamath legend, it was the home of Lao, the spirit of the underworld. He lived beneath the earth, hidden from the world. But he would sometimes rise to look out across the land. One day, Lao saw a beautiful Klamath woman and fell in love with her. He wanted her for himself, but she refused him, chose to stay with her people rather than go with the god of the underworld. Lao didn't take that well. In his fury, he rose from the mountain and rained fire down on the land. Forests burned, rivers boiled, the sky turned black. The people, terrified, cried out to Scale, the spirit of the sky, who lived on Mount Shasta to the south, and Scale heard them. What followed was a battle between gods. Lao and Scale hurled fire and rock at one another across the heavens. Mountains trembled. The earth cracked open. Fire rained from the sky. In the end, Scale overcame Lao and drove him back underground. As punishment, he destroyed the peak of Mount Mazama, collapsing it in on itself, sealing Lao below for eternity. Over the centuries, rain and snow filled the hollow left behind. That, the Klamath say, is how Crater Lake was born. And what's incredible is that modern science doesn't disagree. Geologists now tell us that around 7,700 years ago, Mount Mazama really did explode violently. It was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in North America's history. The blast was massive, over 100 times more powerful than Mount St. Helens in 1980. Ash fell as far away as Alberta in the Midwest. When it was over, the mountain's top had collapsed into a deep basin, which eventually filled with water. That basin became Crater Lake. The depth of it is almost hard to believe. Nearly 2,008 feet. It's the deepest lake in the US and one of the clearest and cleanest in the world. No streams feed it and none drain from it. It's a perfectly self-contained body of water kept alive only by rain and snow. But for the Klamath, it wasn't just geology. It was memory, a spiritual event, a story not just about fire and mountains, but about choices, power and balance. And here's the thing, it wasn't just a myth told after the fact. Archaeologists have found evidence that early Klamath people were living in the area at the time of the eruption. Ash layers in ancient campsites confirm it. That means the story of Lau and Scale may be a living memory passed down for almost 8,000 years. And when you're standing at the edge of the lake, it's easy to believe it. The rim is sharp, high and jagged, nearly 2,000 feet above the water in places. The air is thinner, quieter. Even on windy days, the lake's surface is unnervingly still. You can feel something ancient here, as if the place is holding its breath. And then there's Wizard Island. It rises from the western side of the lake. It's what's left of a later eruption. In the legends, it's where Scale stood after sealing Lau away, watching over the lake to make sure the dark spirit never escaped. Other stories say it's where Lau still waits, trapped and angry, stirring beneath the waves. People today still talk about the lake like it's alive. Some say the weather changes too fast. Others say it's the silence it presses in around you. Hikers report strange dreams. Fishermen talk about seeing shadows beneath the surface, shapes that don't move like fish. It's all anecdotal, sure, but it adds up. There's also the mystery of the Old Man of the Lake. It's a 30-foot log, just a tree trunk really, that's been floating upright in the lake for over 100 years, perfectly vertical, slowly spinning, unaffected by wind or waves. It doesn't drift to shore. It doesn't sink. No one knows exactly why. Some scientists chalk it up to perfect balance and preservation. Others see it as something else, maybe a spirit marker, a totem, a silent watcher. Even the rangers tend to leave it alone. Then there are the disappearances. Crater Lake has a long, strange history of people vanishing. Some of it makes sense. Steep cliffs, sudden drops, cold water, but not all. Hikers have gone missing without a trace. Planes have crashed near the lake and were never found. One man was last seen standing near the rim. No body, no gear, nothing, just gone. Some blame the terrain. Others point to magnetic anomalies, areas where compasses stop working or instruments go haywire. And then, of course, there are those who say Lau is still down there waiting. Whether you believe the legends or not, there's no denying the atmosphere. Crater Lake isn't just scenic, it feels heavy, ancient, like it remembers. Today, visiting is easy. There's a well-maintained national park, paved roads, clear signs. In summer, you can take boat tours out to Wizard Island. There's a visitor center, lodges, trails with sweeping views. On a clear day, you can even see Mount Shasta far off in the distance, the other peak in that ancient battle. But if you go, try to find a quiet spot, set down the camera, turn off your phone, sit for a minute, and just watch. Look at the rim, the way it curls around the lake like a broken crown. Watch how the color shifts from dark cobalt to almost glowing blue. Listen to the wind. Maybe you won't feel anything strange, or maybe just for a second you'll feel that old story stirring. The battle in the sky, the fire, the fall, the silence that came after. Because Crater Lake isn't just a lake, it's a memory, a scar, a shrine. And whether told in legend or written in ash, its story isn't over. It's just beneath the surface. The Oregon Vortex. Just off a quiet stretch of road near Gold Hill, Oregon, there's a strange little place hidden in the trees. It's not big. It's not flashy, but for decades, it's left people wondering if the laws of nature are as solid as we think. This is the Oregon Vortex, and once you've stepped inside, it's hard to shake the feeling that something isn't quite right. Here, people appear to change height just by switching places. Balls roll uphill. Folks lean at bizarre angles without tipping over. It's weird, and it's been messing with people's heads for generations. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a small patch of slanted forest. A couple of crooked shacks, a gravel path, some old boards and props. But there's something about it, something you feel more than see. Let's rewind a bit and look at how it all started. Back in 1904, a gold assay office was built on the site, just a simple wooden cabin. Over time, it shifted and settled so unevenly that now it leans like it's about to give up and fall over. People started calling it the House of Mystery. Locals working nearby began noticing odd things. Animals, especially horses, refused to walk through a certain part of the land. Compasses acted strange. People standing side by side looked like they were different heights even though they weren't. They'd switch places and suddenly the shorter one was taller. In the 1930s, a man named John Litster bought the property. He was a Scottish engineer and geologist, and he wasn't just looking to run a roadside attraction. He thought something real was going on, something science hadn't quite caught up to yet. He called it a vortex, a kind of energy field that twisted space in weird ways. Litster started running public tours and doing experiments. He took it seriously, measuring angles, writing everything down, trying to figure it out. His notes and his passion for the place are a big reason the vortex still exists today. And the strange part, the weird stuff still happens. Take the gravity hill effect. There's a spot where it looks like the ground slopes downhill, but when you roll a ball or pour water, it moves uphill. You can watch it happen over and over, and it still doesn't make sense. Then there's the height change illusion. Two people stand side by side. One clearly looks taller. They switch places and now the other one does. It happens even on spots that seem flat. You'll catch yourself checking the ground to see what's going on. It's disorienting. Inside the old cabin, things get even stranger. The tilt of the building messes with your balance so much that people can lean forward, almost like they're about to fall, but somehow stay upright. Some say it feels like being pushed or pulled. Others report feeling dizzy or like the air is heavier. You're just off balance in every way. Now, the official explanation from the folks who run the site is that there's a spherical force field about 165 ft across that bends gravity, light, and perception. No one's been able to scientifically prove that, but when you're standing in it, it doesn't sound quite as crazy as it might from the outside. Skeptics, of course, have plenty to say. Most scientists chalk it all up to optical illusions and carefully constructed buildings. The slanted cabin tricks your sense of direction. Forced perspective messes with how your brain reads size and distance. Your inner ear gets confused. Your eyes try to make sense of the tilt, and your brain just fails a little. And that does explain a lot of it, but not all of it. Some visitors, including surveyors and even a few physicists, have pointed out that compasses really do behave oddly here. And the height change effect, it happens even in spots outside the cabin on what should be level ground. So is it all just clever design? Or is there something else happening, something magnetic, geological, energetic that we just don't understand yet? There are theories. Some say the vortex sits on a natural magnetic anomaly, possibly caused by minerals underground or nearby fault lines. There's a school of thought that geomagnetic fields under certain conditions can mess with our perception or balance. That might explain the dizziness or strange sensations some people feel. Others take things a bit further. They talk about ley lines, energy grids, dimensional overlaps, more spiritual or even paranormal ideas. And while those ideas tend to stretch beyond what science can back up, the fact that the vortex doesn't have a complete explanation gives them just enough room to survive. Interestingly, the Oregon Vortex isn't the only place like this. There are other mystery spots across the US in California, Michigan, North Carolina, even parts of Canada. They share the same kinds of features: tilted houses, height illusions, balls rolling uphill. Some people take that as proof that it's all a visual trick, something you can build anywhere. Others wonder if there's a deeper connection between these spots. And thanks to John Litster's scientific approach, it has a sort of credibility that others don't. He wasn't just trying to fool people. He genuinely believed this place was worth studying. Today, if you visit, you'll get a guided tour. The staff know the routine well. They've got the jokes, the demos, the wow moments down pat. They'll show you the height illusion, roll marbles on tilted boards, invite you to lean against walls that feel like they're pulling you sideways. It's fun, it's playful, but there's always this sense that they're not giving you the full answer. They leave room for the mystery, maybe because they don't fully understand it either, and maybe that's why people keep coming, not just for the photos or the weird effects. but for the feeling, the part you can't explain. For some, this is the first time they really stop and question their assumptions about the world. It's easy to say it's just a trick of the eyes, but when you're standing there and feeling it, it's harder to be so sure. There's a term some people use for places like this: thin places. Spots where the boundaries between what we understand and what we don't understand feel especially thin, where reality has a little give to it. And the vortex feels like one of those. From a sensory perspective, it's subtle, but striking. The trees lean at strange angles. The light filters through the branches in a sharp, slanted way. The air is cooler, quieter. Your footsteps crunch along gravel while your mind tries to make sense of what your body is experiencing. Laughter and chatter echo from the tour guide and other guests. But under all of it, there's this little hum of uncertainty. And when you leave, you'll probably keep thinking about it, not just what you saw, but what you felt. That brief moment where your body didn't believe your brain or vice versa. Is it all just clever design? Probably. Is it something more? Maybe. And that's the magic of the Oregon Vortex. It doesn't give you answers. It just opens the door and lets the weirdness speak for itself. And sometimes that's all it needs to do. Neahkahnie Mountain treasure and carvings. If you've ever driven along the Oregon coast, there's a spot just north of Manzanita that makes you slow down. Not just because of the sharp turns, but because the view catches your breath. The road squeezes between the forested cliffs on one side and a sheer drop to the ocean on the other. That's Neahkahnie Mountain. It's not the tallest mountain around, but it has a presence. Dark, rugged cliffs, moss-covered tree, mist that rolls in suddenly and vanishes just as fast. On a clear day, you can see for miles blue water stretching out toward the horizon. The curve of the earth just barely visible if you squint. But what really makes Neahkahnie stand out isn't the view. It's what might be hidden deep beneath it. Locals have whispered about this place for generations, stories of buried treasure. Not just any treasure, Spanish gold, and not just hidden, but possibly guarded. By what, you ask? Depends who you talk to. Some say ancient curses, others believe there are clues carved into stone, or even spirits watching over the mountain. The legend begins all the way back in the 1600s during the age of Spanish exploration. At the time, Spanish ships called galleons were sailing the Pacific regularly. They traveled between Mexico and the Philippines and occasionally made their way farther north along the coast we now call Oregon. According to one version of the story, one of these ships ended up off the coast near Neahkahnie Mountain, maybe damaged by a storm, maybe just off course. A group of men supposedly came ashore carrying a heavy chest. They hiked it up into the woods, buried it, and tried to make sure it would never be disturbed. That's where the story takes a darker turn. Some say the crew killed one of their own, a person described in most tellings as either an African or native slave, and buried him with the treasure, a human sacrifice, not just to hide the gold, but to place a spirit protector over it. It's the kind of tale that sounds too brutal to be true, but it's been part of Oregon folklore for hundreds of years. Before the Spanish ever arrived, though, Neahkahnie was already seen as powerful. The local Tiluk people considered it sacred. The name itself is often translated as place of the god or home of spirits. It wasn't just a mountain. It was a place you approached with respect. Some of their stories spoke of it as a thin place where the barrier between this world and the next felt fragile. So when strange markings started showing up on rocks around the mountain, people began to wonder. Over the years, hikers, treasure hunters, and curious locals have reported seeing carvings in stone crosses, arrows, geometric patterns. Some found rocks that looked like they'd been cut or placed deliberately. There were even reports of Latin words etched into stone or numbers written in an unfamiliar style. One carving that gets mentioned a lot is a large rock shaped sort of like a beehive with strange symbols scratched into its surface. Others have found trees with unusual marks or shallow pits that look like someone tried digging long ago and gave up. And many did try. In the 1800s and early 1900s, people became obsessed with the idea that Spanish treasure was buried somewhere on Neahkahnie. Locals, travelers, even engineers got involved. They dug shafts straight down into the mountain. Some over 40 ft deep, a few tunnels collapsed, others filled with water, some tools rusted overnight, as if the mountain itself didn't want to give up its secrets. There were rumors of booby traps, of charred wood layers deep underground, like maybe something had once been burned to hide or protect whatever was buried there. But no gold was ever found. And every time someone got close, or thought they did, something went wrong. A sudden injury, a rock slide, tools failing for no reason. Those setbacks only added to the legend. People started to believe the treasure was cursed, or that something spiritual was guarding it. Of course, there's no hard proof. Spanish records from the 1600s are incomplete, and no one's ever pulled up a verified artifact from the mountain. But that hasn't stopped people from looking. Even today, you'll sometimes spot someone off trail with a metal detector or see small piles of stones that look a little too intentional. Not everyone's up there for the view. Then there's the other part of the mystery. Less about gold, more about something harder to explain. Locals have long said that just before sunset, if the light hits the cliffs at the right angle, a face appears. Not just any face, a profile carved by shadow, a head, a nose, a watching eye. Some say it's just the shape of the rocks and the light playing tricks. Others believe it's a sign left behind by those who hid the treasure. Some people swear they've seen it. Others say it vanishes the moment you try to take a photo. It might sound like something out of a campfire story. But when you're standing there in person on the edge of the cliff with the ocean crashing below and the wind howling through the trees, it's hard not to feel something. A sense of being watched. A feeling that the land remembers more than it shows. And maybe that's the real heart of this legend. It's not just a Spanish mystery or an indigenous sacred place or a treasure map waiting to be solved. It's all of that layered over itself like mist that never fully clears. When you hike Neahkahnie today, it's quiet. The trail winds through thick coastal forest. You'll pass moss-covered rocks, soft ground padded with pine needles, and trees that creak in the wind. Depending on the season, you might be completely alone. As you climb higher, the forest thins out, and then suddenly you're at the top. The view is enormous, beaches stretching into the distance, the Pacific Ocean sprawling endlessly below, the little town of Manzanita far beneath you. It's beautiful, but there's also something heavy about it, like the mountain is holding something close just out of reach. You won't find any signs pointing to treasure, no big X on the ground. But you might find something else. An old carving, a pile of rocks, a strange quiet that hangs in the air. Is there gold buried here? It's possible. Spanish ships did sail these waters, and the markings people find, real or imagined, do show up in just enough places to make you wonder. But maybe the real treasure is the story itself. The way this mountain draws people in, the way it makes you stop, look around, and feel like you're standing at the edge of something ancient and unfinished. A place where the line between myth and memory gets a little blurry. A mountain that doesn't need to explain itself, it just waits. Willamette Meteorite. Out in the rolling green fields of Oregon's Willamette Valley, there's a mystery that doesn't quite belong. It's not a tree or a river or part of the rich farmland. It's made of iron and nickel. It weighs over 15 tons, and it didn't come from Earth. It came from space. This is the Willamette Meteorite, the largest meteorite ever found in North America, and easily one of the strangest objects in Oregon's history. It's unimaginably old, older than the forests, older than the mountains. And its story from the moment it arrived to where it sits today is full of surprises, conflict, and questions we still don't fully understand. Let's start with how it was found. In 1902, a man named Ellis Hughes was walking through the woods near what's now West Linn, Oregon. He wasn't a scientist, just a settler trying to make a life for his family. One day, deep in the trees, he came across a massive, twisted chunk of metal sticking out of the ground. It looked like nothing he'd ever seen. The surface was full of pits and strange grooves, shaped almost like melted wax or the skin of another world. Hughes quickly realized this thing wasn't ordinary, and maybe it was worth something. So, in one of the more bizarre chapters of Oregon history, he decided to steal it. He and his teenage son built a homemade cart, and over the course of several weeks tried to roll the 15-ton meteorite, more than half a mile across uneven forest terrain, to their own property. No roads, no heavy machinery, just muscle, grit, and pure stubbornness. Word eventually got out, and it turns out Hughes didn't own the land where he found it that belonged to the Oregon Iron and Steel Company. They took him to court, won the case, and took possession of the meteorite. A few years later, the company sold it to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, where it still sits today. If you want to see it, you've got to go across the country. That fact still stings for a lot of people in Oregon, but the story goes way deeper than 1902. Geologists estimate the Willamette Meteorite is over 10,000 years old. And here's the weird part. There's no impact crater anywhere near where it was found. No hole in the ground. No signs of a collision. Just this enormous piece of space metal sitting quietly in the woods. So, how did it get there? To understand that, you have to go back to the last ice age. During that time, a series of massive floods called the Missoula floods ripped across what's now the Pacific Northwest. These weren't small events. These were floods on a scale hard to imagine. Walls of water hundreds of feet high, crashing down valleys, reshaping the land. The theory is that the Willamette meteorite originally landed somewhere much farther north, maybe Canada or Montana. Then during one of those floods, it was picked up by a giant raft of ice and carried hundreds of miles south. When the ice melted, it dropped the meteorite in the Willamette Valley. It didn't crash here. It floated. But even before Hughes came across it, people already knew the meteorite. People who understood its presence in a much different way. The Clackamas Chinook people, a branch of the Kalapuya tribe, called it Tomu, a word that roughly means heavenly visitor or sky person. To them, this wasn't just a rock, it was sacred. They believed Tomos had spiritual power. They'd come to visit it, leave offerings. It was part of their story, part of their world, not just something that fell from the sky, but something given. So when the meteorite was taken away, shipped to New York and put behind glass, it wasn't just a scientific specimen that was lost. It was a spiritual loss, a cultural one, and for decades, members of the tribe had no access to it. That changed in the year 2000. The Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon filed a legal claim to reconnect with Tomans. They weren't asking to own it exactly. They were asking for recognition, for the right to honor and maintain a relationship with something that had mattered to them for generations. After negotiations, a compromise was reached. The meteorite would stay in New York, but members of the Grand Ronde community would be allowed to visit it each year for private ceremonial use. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something, a step toward healing, toward respect. And really, the Willamette Meteorite lives in this in-between space, a place where science, history, and culture all overlap. It's a rock from space, but it's also a symbol of conflict, of reverence, of power, of how humans interact with the unknown. If you drive out to the original discovery site near Westland today, you might not even notice it. There's no crater, no grand display, just a quiet patch of trees and a small stone marker off a rural road. Blink and you'll miss it, and maybe that's the most surreal part of this story. For thousands of years, this object, this iron giant, just sat there through ice, fire, flood, and forest. And long before cities, before borders, before anyone called this place Oregon, It watched the world change without moving an inch. Today, there's a life-size replica on display at the Museum of the Oregon Territory. You can walk around it, touch it, see the deep pits and jagged surface up close. It doesn't look like it belongs here, but somehow it also feels like it does. Standing next to it, you can't help but feel small. You realize how long the universe has been doing its thing without us, how objects like this existed before we were born and will be here long after we're gone. The Willamette Meteorite isn't just a piece of space debris. It's a marker of deep time, a sacred symbol, a legal battle, a cultural wound, and in some ways, a quiet reconciliation. It also asks something simple but hard. Who gets to claim the past? Who gets to tell the story? And maybe, like the rock itself, the answer isn't so easily moved. More than a century after it was first unearthed, the meteorite still draws people in. Scientists, tribal members, tourists, kids on field trips, curious wanderers, and they all seem to feel the same thing. Not fear, not even awe exactly, but something quieter, a kind of reverence, like they're standing in the presence of something impossibly old and still watching.